Hello, everyone. Welcome to Out of Sight, Out of Mind, an introduction to ocean remediation of underwater munitions, hosted by Revolve and in partnership with JPI Oceans. Thank you to everyone who's joining today. We have a lot of people from America, the UK, Kenya, so great to see everyone. If you want to write in the chat where everyone's from as well, shout out to you all. Thank you for coming along. We're really excited to host this virtual session with some of our leading experts on a very important topic of underwater munitions. And if you're not aware, underwater munitions are munitions from war that have been strategically placed at the bottom of the seabeds. So today we will be joined by Peter Neufeld, who is a solution owner for of UXO risk mitigation at Fugro. He has 5 years of experience working in UXO, which is unexploded ordnance. He's most recently been helping with research for scalable solutions at Fugro. Then we also have Olga Lopera Teles, and she's a research manager at the Belgian Royal Military Academy. With a background in engineering, she has a lot of scientific interest in target detection and identification and seabed monitoring. Then we have Aaron Beck, who is from Geomar, and he's a senior biogeochemist, with 10 years of expertise and a big focus on sea-dumped conventional munitions on a global scale, looking at toxic compounds and new technology. So just a quick note on some housekeeping. This is a live stream and it will be recorded, so we can share with the recording afterwards. Any questions that you have, we will have a Q&A following presentations from our speakers. So please send your questions in the chat and make sure to add in your name, your outlet, and if you're happy to share your contacts as well. We will address this during the Q&A session, and if there's any questions that are unanswered, we will be in touch following the press briefing. I would now like to pass over to Paul Trottendorfer, who is a science policy advisor at JPI Oceans. He's going to give you a bit of background into underwater munitions in the sea.
Yeah, thank you very much, Holly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So hello, everyone. I will quickly share my screen. So I think you should see my screen. Is that right?
Yes, we can see. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, so quick introduction. Very happy to partner up here with the Revolve magazine. We ourselves are JPI Oceans. Who is JPI Oceans? We are a trans-governmental platform that brings together ministries of science, of research, and also scientific council across Europe. You see here our member countries focusing on marine research. And through that, we also came in connection with the topic of munitions in the sea. For almost 10 years, we're actually leading also a joint action munition in the sea in the form of a knowledge hub. So we brought together experts from across our member countries, figuring out ways how can we actually deal with this issue from a science perspective especially. And this has now ended, but we are still involved, or actually got now quite recently involved in 2 current EU-funded projects. This is the Minesweeper project and the Camera project, where we from our side focus on the topics of communication, knowledge transfer, and policy-related efforts. So why is it actually exactly now the right time to speak more about this topic? There's always enough reason to speak about this topic and raise awareness, but we can see currently actually quite a momentum for this topic. We have just seen the European Union before the summer launching a European Ocean Pact, where they are explicitly mentioning to work on Europe-wide UXO removal strategies. We can see regional action plans of the regional sea conventions in the Baltic Sea and the North Sea, HELCOM and OSPAR. We can see a joint ocean agenda by France and Germany, who also want to take joint efforts onto this topic. We have in Germany a 100 million euro backed project, the German Immediate Action Program. And even on the higher UN level, we see now more and more discussions of maritime security in the UN Security Council. So there is definitely a bit of momentum for this. And this brings us also then to what we're, to a certain extent, doing today here. We're bringing together different projects and raise awareness for the topic, try to synergize our efforts, especially within the different research projects that are currently happening. You see here an array of the current projects, and we also have today the other speakers from a bunch of them represented. And with that, I say thank you very much, and I give over to Aaron Beck.
Thanks very much, Paul. I'll try to share my screen here as well. Okay. Looks like you can see it there, so this is good. So yeah, as Holly mentioned, my name is Aaron Beck. I'm a scientist at the Guiomar Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research in Kiel. And you see listed here a whole bunch of my colleagues here at Guiomar. We've been working on this topic of sea dump munitions for about 10 years, 11 years now, really on a focus on the environmental side. So what I wanted to do was just show a little bit of at least how the problematic looks from our perspective. So here you can see, really, we deal with sea dump munitions. So these are munitions that were disposed of after particularly the First and Second World Wars. This was either by sinking ships filled with munitions or by dumping en masse overboard. Here interspersed with this historical film, you can see footage that we've taken at some local dump sites in the Baltic Sea, just to give you a sense of how they look now. And in the upper right-hand corner, you can see these barges where the bottom can open and the munitions dump out of the bottom. So often what we deal with are these piles of munition objects. And we're really focused on this because this is the largest mass of munitions. And as a result, the largest source of environmental contamination. And of course, I'll show a bit of footage and data from the Baltic Sea, because that's where we've been working, but this is really a global problem. So we've been working locally, but we think that a lot of this is transferable globally. This is kind of what it looks like on the seafloor in the Baltic Sea. You see munitions of all kinds of different types and sizes, everything from sea mines to torpedoes, boxes of small caliber munitions, large torpedo heads and ground mines. In the lower picture with the diver, you can see chunks of exposed explosive material. So one of the things that we're really interested in, concerned about, are the toxic chemicals that come from these explosives. So you can see this sort of major source. We do lots of seabed mapping to try and find the munitions. It's not always obvious where they actually are, even if you're in a so-called munition dump site, followed by sort of more high resolution optical imaging. Here you see a photo mosaic at very high resolution of some cluster bombs. This is another image with a number of different objects, torpedo heads, sea mines, ground mines, and quite a lot of exposed explosive material. So this is one of the biggest sources of contamination that we've identified. And all of these munition dump sites have very different objects. They seem to have different chemical sources. They're in different conditions, so the corrosion state varies from site to site. So when we're thinking about the environmental impact, it varies from munition dump site to munition dump site. So not all dump munitions, at least from a modern perspective, are sort of equal in terms of the modern contamination. And the reason why we're interested in this is because all of the conventional explosive materials are essentially toxic chemicals. So these are carcinogenic, genotoxic, cytotoxic chemicals. And when they're released to the marine environment, then they're taken up by organisms. And so we've seen this in the Baltic Sea, that most of the organisms that we've tested have low levels of these chemicals in their tissues. And we've done large-scale mapping of the chemical release in the water column. Here you see the concentration of dissolved TNT. This is in the southwest Baltic Sea. And having collected thousands of samples, we see dissolved TNT or other explosive or explosive-related compounds in almost every water sample. So the contamination is widespread. This is sort of a side view of that, and looking at a section along the water column, and essentially you can see big plumes of these chemicals coming off the dump sites where we know that the munitions are corroded. This is just to give you a little bit of a sense of that. These are some of these large V1 rocket warheads, somewhere 800 to 1,000 kilograms of explosive in each one. And so you can see that some of them are corroded to the point where you see the explosive. We can see the explosive falling apart. Some of the munitions are so far decayed that there is no more explosive material left. That was probably contamination in the past. There are some where it's exposed. We know this is a big modern source of contamination. And there are some which are not corroded yet. And those are likely to be the contamination source of the future. And all of these objects, because they're hard substrates, sort of act like artificial reefs. So there's lots of organisms around them, and that probably heightens the environmental impact. Paul alluded to this, but the German Immediate Action Program to clear the munitions sort of has this focus to try and remove the munitions before all of these chemicals have the opportunity to get into the environment. And that's something that we're both involved in, engaged with, and also pretty excited about this opportunity to actually remediate this source of environmental pollution. So with that, I'll hand it over to Olga. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Aaron. I will try to share my screen now. And I do apologize. I had a beautiful background like my colleagues behind me, but I think it disappeared now. But okay. All right. So hello, everyone. I'm Olga Lopera. I'm coming from the Royal Military Academy, RMA. There I work as a research manager and also a senior researcher in the remote sensing lab. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the projects I am coordinating in the Royal Military Academy that are related to naval mine countermeasures and how we relate these and how we transfer the knowledge we have from mine countermeasures into the marine munition remediation. So the Royal Military Academy basically is the only federal university in the heart of Belgium, in Brussels. We have 12 research departments in which we develop and we advance technology to help ensure our continued peace and security. We are collaborating with several countries around the world, more focusing on European and North American countries. We have over 300 researchers currently working in more than 500 projects. From these researchers, 93 are PhD students, and we have a large number of peer-reviewed publications. I'm working inside the Communications, Information Systems and Sensors department, the CISS department, where we have projects dealing with land, sea, air, and between cyber and space problems. And inside this department, then we have 5 different labs: cyber defense, radio networks, laser and optronics, applying electromagnetics, and the lab where I'm working is remote sensing. So we have different projects inside the lab of remote sensing dealing with naval mine countermeasures. One of the projects is dealing with mission planning and evaluation. In here we try to optimize the way we deploy different assets to clear an area, and not only to optimally deploy these assets, but also to evaluate and predict their performance. We also work with mine sweeping technology. In this project, we also optimize the way an array of sensors that is towed by an unmanned surface vessel is deployed. And this is an array of sensors that emulate the signatures, the electric, magnetic, and acoustic signatures of vessels. This with the aim of detonating the mines before the vessel enters the area. We also work with inside mine hunting applications. We work with drifting mines detection. For this, we in the project we use unmanned aerial vessel or vehicle in which we attach a payload of electro-optical cameras. These are cameras working in the visual spectrum, but also beyond, like in the infrared spectrum. And the idea is to survey the area and to detect drifting mines. Also, we work underwater with side-scan sonar, synthetic aperture sonar, forward-looking sonar for seabed characterization and bottom mines detection and identification. And then, yeah, the big question here is how we used all this development that we have done for mine countermeasures into munition remediation. It kind of looked like very, very simple, straightforward, but it has some work behind. So we need to do a kind of knowledge transfer, not only work on the information and the know-how, but also to organize the information we have and the algorithms we have developed, and to fine-tune to this precise application. So as Aaron showed in his pictures, in his presentation, mines don't look like UXOs, and they are not distributed in the same way that UXOs are present in the bottom of the sea. So it's a very different approach, a very difficult approach. So we need to fine-tune this kind of algorithm, this kind of knowledge. A very important point here is that we have a link with the Belgian Navy, who they also act as Coast Guard. So they are dealing with all these munitions as well, not only with the mine countermeasures part, but also dealing with dumping sites. We have then, as I mentioned, the artificial intelligence-based detection and classification algorithms that we adapt and we fine-tune for this particular application for different kinds of sensors. And we also work, the part of seabed classification is important for predict how the sediments around these munitions are acting to bury those munitions, because it's important to know what is under as well. For detecting munitions that are buried, there are other kind of sensors that can help us, like low frequency SAS or magnetic sensors. And this is the work we are doing together with my colleagues into Minesweeper, the Minesweeper project, the European project. Okay, this is the end. And before we go to discussion, I will pass the word to Peter, but I'm here happy to answer all your questions.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Peter Neufeld. I'm the solution owner for UXO risk mitigation at Fugro. And Fugro is a commercial company. We're a geodata company. We operate on land, in space, and in the air, and on and under the sea. And a part of what we do as a company is that we mitigate risk of unexploded ordnances, mostly for industry, offshore construction industry. So for the building of infrastructure like offshore wind farms and cables and associated infrastructure. And over the last few years, we've been becoming increasingly involved in the discussion around dumped marine munitions and the threat that they pose to marine ecosystems and the blue economy and just to general society, really. And so there's a good fit between large companies like Fugro and the size and scale of the challenge that we're trying to address. We have a lot of experience and resources as a company, and so we're really interested in contributing to finding solutions to what is really a global challenge. So we see industry in general as being critical to a part of the puzzle of solving that problem, of scaling technologies and methods and resources to really have a meaningful and a sustainable impact. And so it also actually aligns very closely with some of our company values as well. So participating in climate and nature solutions and ocean health is something that we are increasingly doing as well. And dumped marine munitions, it's not a new problem. It's been around for a long time, but the research is indicating that really the problem is becoming quite urgent. As you know, the longer these items have been down there, we can see an increasing impact on the environment for a start, but also in other areas. And so the urgency of the problem is really increasing. And we believe that there's a lot that we can contribute in terms of the research. So we've recently started becoming involved in some of that formalized research in the form of the Camera project. We're part of that consortium. And we really believe that we can contribute a lot there. And some of the things that have already been mentioned, there's a huge amount of research by this time that's available. And so really we're complementing the existing and the past research projects For instance, one of the things that Fugro aims to do is develop tooling to remove some of that open and decayed and exposed munitions compound that Dr. Beck mentioned earlier, such as the V1 rocket warheads. It's that kind of expertise that we really think that we can bring to this community in terms of finding solutions, and we're really excited to be a part of that. But generally speaking, beyond just our own experience, we think there's a huge amount of experience available in industry, which can really help push this research and the development towards a scalable solution that can really have an impact into the future when we get to the opportunity to start doing that. So we're very excited to be involved in this. I think it's a big problem that needs to be resolved. I think we're on the right path. And yeah, thank you very much. I'm very happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you for that. Thanks for all of our speakers chipping in there and giving the different perspectives. Overarching theme of research here, but there's obviously the industry, there's the naval. So yeah, it's great to hear. I'm going to start off a question just to kind of this is an introduction to underwater munitions. So Aaron, could you give us just a few examples of the differences between these munitions? What's the different types and what's the challenge that comes with these different types of munitions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is one of the big differences between the people that you've organized for this panel, because on the academic side, we're exclusively, at least at this point, focused on these historical munitions, and primarily ones that were dumped after the First and Second World Wars. So we don't deal with modern munitions, and we also don't deal with UXO for the most part. So the advantage of the dump munitions, if you want to call it that, is that they tend to be very high concentrated spatially, and they also tend to be relatively more safe than UXO. So UXO being munitions that were deployed during war, which have the full explosive chain, and compared with something like dump munitions, which typically don't have fuses, and tend to be, at least from the perspective of the experts that we collaborate with, they're able to be handled more safely. So that's something that I'm sure that Olga and Peter can say more about.
Yes, Olga, would you like to follow up on that with the sort of munitions that you're looking at within your research?
Yes, so I was, as I was saying in the presentation, indeed, so for a military perspective, from the military point of view, the munitions are deployed in a different way. So it's not a dump site, it's not a dumping site, but it's more, they are strategically placed on the bottom of the sea to prevent the enemy to enter a harbor, for instance. So they are not like together, but spread in an area. So once we know an area is a mined area, we don't know if there is one mine or there is 10 mines. So we need to clear the full area in order to let the convoy enter the mined area. So it's a different approach, but we can learn a lot from this approach to be the developments of this approach to be applied in the munition application, because we are using the similar sensors. We are working in the similar environment that is underwater, and we are dealing with the same problematic, that is different type of sea bottoms that can cause difficulties when you are detecting and when you're trying to identify the targets that you are detecting underwater. So here there is a overlapping between an application that is in fact dual use, so it's military and civilian use.
Great, thank you. And Peter, if you'd like to follow up with the munitions that you're working on.
Yeah, certainly. So a company like Fugro that is operating in a very commercial environment has a slightly different focus. We work primarily for the offshore energy industry, and you're not really going to try and build an offshore wind farm on an area that has a known dumping site. So dumped marine munitions is not something that in industry and in our normal work we've come across very often. But there's a huge amount of overlap in the expertise, the subject engineering that we conduct, the survey techniques that we use that will definitely contribute to the dump marine munitions side. What we're used to dealing with is UXO, which unexploded ordnances typically are weapons, historic weapons, but they've been fired in conflict, or they have been salvoed before an aircraft lands, for instance. So they are more of the needle in the haystack kind of problem to solve, in terms of we have a vast area of seabed where a client is considering developing some infrastructure, and we're basically surveying the entire area, looking for pieces of debris, and then determining which pieces of debris are likely to be unexploded ordnances of any kind. And then when we do determine which ones are UXO related items, the assumption is that they've been fired and are fused and have to be approached in a very cautious kind of way. And so our expertise is around survey and detection of all of these items, but then also uncovering and identifying them, and then also clearing them. So we have quite a broad experience, and it's all done in the subsea environment. So that combination of expertise really can help with solving and transferring to the problem of dumping sites, really, where in some ways the problem is very different, but there are enough similarities that we think a lot of knowledge and technology that we use can transfer.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know, Paul, if you have anything that you'd like to add to that as well.
I think what kind of shows this now already quite prominently is also that whatever munition type we're speaking of actually still overlaps the different domains also. So it's not just the one, it's not only about environmental impact, or the other one is only the security impact, but it's economic development, is then also human safety, and kind of all four of them go into the different directions. So still, dump munitions are maybe now historically seen more from the environmental impact, but also they kind of get more the other domains also that they have been also approached from that side.
And I think we can say that there's the consensus between everyone that like these munitions do need to be removed. In certain cases, I guess, Aaron, these dump sites have been, the historical dump sites have been there so long that they've actually become environmental ecosystems to some animals. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And I think from the environmental perspective, it's pretty clear. And I guess you see this in some of the images I showed, that there are, I would say, more urgent, there are urgent parts of these dump sites that should be cleared as a first priority. And when Peter's talking about these UXO, which are much more sort of diffusely distributed, when we're talking about dump sites, we're talking about locations that really have the highest concentration of this material, and really are sort of priority locations for clearance. And then within those, we have these munitions which are corroded and falling apart, and which are actually releasing the chemicals currently. And those are probably the objects that need to be dealt with first. And then, as Peter also mentioned, then one of the focus of the camera project is to look at how do we actually deal with some of these crumbling munitions. So how do you actually recover some of that explosive material if it's no longer contained? Can it actually be physically held and collected? And can it be recovered in a way that is environmentally helpful, I guess, without releasing even more of the chemicals during the handling than would have been otherwise? And that's clearly a challenge. And I think it's something, maybe Olga and Peter can correct me if I'm wrong, but something which hasn't been done before, because this is a relatively unique kind of a situation, and one that isn't necessarily from a security perspective, let's say from ship traffic or something like that. It's not the critical object to be cleared. Whereas from an environmental perspective, it certainly is of a higher priority than a munition which is completely intact, which isn't releasing any of the explosive chemicals.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Peter, from your perspective on the industry side?
Yeah, well, just to comment on what Rebecca just said, it is that there's this, or at least we see that there's this distinction at a a dump munitions site between the future polluters and the current polluters. And the future polluters are those items that are still intact, that the explosive material and the chemicals are contained. And that is by far the vast majority of items. They need to be removed because they will become pollution sources in the future. So deal with them now while they're easier to deal with. Those ones that are already current polluters are the ones that are broken and exposed to the marine environment. Now they're a little bit more challenging to deal with. And there have been efforts to recover some of those before, but in very limited quantities, mostly for research purposes, and by state military EOD services essentially. And so we're trying to learn from their experience to feed into what we're trying to do in the Camera project, to extend that capability and come up with something that's scalable and can be done en masse, almost in an industrialized kind of way to deal with it. So it is an interesting challenge, but it is something that so far the current research has been focusing on the easier problem to solve and the bigger problem, which is correct. But now we're going to try and complement that by aiming at the slightly more difficult but more urgent problem of the current polluters.
Yes, and just speaking of the past munitions, which obviously are pollutants, and then there's also this future aspect too. So sorry, one second. I can see that we have a question through in the chat. So speaking of these future emissions and future pollutants, we have a question here from Kieran, who's from Context, and he's asking, do you think munitions clearance in the Caspian Sea would be a significant part of Ukraine's future reconstruction after the war? Perhaps Olga, you could start on this question.
Okay, before continuing, I want just to clarify that I'm not military, I'm civilian. So I'm not really involved in what the Belgian Navy or other NATO countries are actually currently doing to mitigate the impact of the war in Ukraine. But yes, as we have seen on the news, on some of the news that are appearing on social media or on different channels, it is a big problem, not only for the security of the country itself, but also for commercial vessels is also a big problem. Munition that is deployed at sea or drifting mines or unexploded ordnance that is deployed at sea, it poses a threat to these cargo ships that are bringing commercial items out to other countries. So it's really having an impact not only for the Ukrainian people, but generally speaking for many other countries. So indeed, it's very important that we act there, we detect and neutralize all these munitions there. It's not an easy task, as we have seen also in the media. It's not that easy to spot because since they are there, we don't know. It's not like historical sites where we know the location and we can go and work on that specific spot. They are randomly appearing, and we know from fishermen or we know from commercial vessels. But it's very random, so it's very difficult to handle this problem.
Yeah, and Peter, do you think, complementing what Olga said there, do you think this is where Fugro could support in these more recent ongoing conflicts, finding these, as you're saying, needle in a haystack sort of munitions?
I'll just fill in one little gap, and that is that part of the Camera project, another aspect of what we're doing is to understand in different European sea basins what the drivers are behind the need, what the maturity of understanding is in these different areas. And the Black Sea specifically is a focus area for the EU to understand. So that's included in our scope. And we work there with a partner called the New Strategy Center based in Romania to try and find the right stakeholders in the region at all sorts of levels, not just military, but political, in the public space, industry representatives, NGOs, to really get a very broad-based view on what the priorities are. Now, in an area like the Black Sea, which is undergoing a current war situation, we expect the priorities to be completely different to when we speak to stakeholders in the North Sea basin, for instance. In the Baltic, we know there's environmental drivers, there's societal drivers, there's blue economy drivers. In the Baltic Sea, in the Black Sea, it's going to be completely different. There's clearly a different priority there. Fugro is not going to go and help clear actively deployed mines and munitions in an active war scenario. That's just never going to happen. It's not our role. It's not our expertise. That is a military approach for that. But hopefully peacetime comes very soon, and we will get to a stage in the near future where those urgent threats will be resolved, safety is restored in the region, and then companies like Fugro would have the opportunity to then contribute to any kind of cleanup effort. But then there's a lot of things that need to happen before that. It doesn't mean we can't understand the situation now and understand the drivers and prepare ourselves for that opportunity to participate, but that's not going to happen while there's active engagement happening in the region.
Thank you. Yeah, completely understandable. And as you're mentioning these drivers, there's actually a comment also from RJ Wenning. So with these drivers, we were saying it depends, different scenarios, what it is that's going to lead to the assessment and removal of these. And he's asking, what is the need for the prioritization of the assessment, the remediation, and the removal of these unexploded ordnances and munitions in the marine environment? Aaron, could I pass this to you to start us off?
Yeah, sure. Happy to start off. I mean, this is one of the big questions because it is an enormous problem, and remediating the problem is going to be hugely expensive, no matter how you do it. So how do you prioritize it? We will never have munition-free seas. As Peter mentioned, it's a needle in a haystack kind of a task, even if you're only trying to clear a small area where you're installing some sort of offshore infrastructure. But we can prioritize where the cleanup should start, maybe where it can be the most effective, where we have the best use of funds for doing that clearance. And certainly from our perspective, from the environmental perspective, focusing on these dump sites is really one of the ways that you can target the remediation efforts in a way which is the most efficient in terms of effort and also of costs. And I think this is something that will come out of the immediate action program here in Germany. So some of the piles that I showed are very similar to some of the test locations where this clearance has been started. And the hope is that once the technologies are developed and once more experience has been gained, that costs will come down, and that eventually we'll have sort of efficiencies of scale and be able to scale this up. But clearly there has to be a clear way to prioritize this in terms of societal impact and environmental impact in order to even start dealing with the problem in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Olga, is there anything that differs for you within the RMA, or is it similar process for the prioritization as well?
Well, it's very linked to what Aaron has said just now, and I explained it also in my presentation. We are supporting the different capabilities that the Belgian Navy has, and the Belgian Navy also as Coast Guards, they are responsible for the security of the Belgian water zone. So all the incidents that happen, for instance, with fishermen, while they deploy their nets, and with these modern techniques of fishing, they collect those UXOs from the bottom, and we have accidents. So they are responsible for that. So there is also not only on the defense side or the keeping up the security of a nation, that the Navy has a role there, and we are supporting them on that. Is also the security of the citizens. So it's very linked to what Aaron has explained. Yes.
Thank you. Peter, is there anything else you'd like to re-emphasize, as you mentioned, these key drivers?
Yeah, I think that the matter of prioritization is different in each region, but there has also been some research done in the past, and yeah, Aaron, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the Daemon and Daemon 2 projects contributed to having some kind of decision support process for trying to bring about some kind of prioritization to deciding where to act first and things. It'll be influenced heavily by the drivers in each region, and we're hoping to discover more about that as we transfer the knowledge and the discussion to the other European sea basins. And maybe we'll have to make adjustments for those local conditions, but where there's economic drivers, where there's health drivers, where the environmental driver, but also what is possible in terms of the current technologies. We can't perhaps tackle a dumping site which may be urgent in many ways, but is 200 meters deep in the water, whereas we've got some which is maybe slightly less urgent, but closer to shore and in 20 meters of water. Maybe that's where we start. So the environmental factors around it as well also contribute to the prioritization and what is possible with the maturity of the technology that we have available.
Yeah,
Thank
maybe
you.
if Holly, I can
please
speak
do.
out of turn
Of course.
here.
Yes.
I think that's a great point, and that's one of the challenges here. Really, is balancing the priorities of all the different stakeholders, because in many cases, we've spoken, for example, with port authorities who have very little interest in the environmental side. They're really interested in protecting ship traffic, for example. And so they have a very different priority than we do from an environmental perspective. And with all these different kinds of stakeholder groups, it's really challenging to balance all of the different priorities. Peter also mentioned the Diamond project, which was also focused a little bit more on chemical weapons. So we haven't really talked about that. We've especially been focused on conventional munitions. But that's also an issue in the Baltic Sea and in many other locations where chemical warfare agents have been dumped, and they represent an entirely different problem altogether. So dealing with those types of munitions is a whole other issue, which I guess we won't get into today. But it's a really complex problem, and that's really one of the challenges of how do you start dealing with it. But these both national and EU scale and also more international projects, not just in Europe, but also in North America and other locations, is really the first step in how do we start trying to grapple with this issue and dealing with it in a way that's effective and efficient.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a press briefing for another day for sure, just on the chemical side of things. I can see we're nearly at the end of the session. So thank you all for your contributions there. I feel like we almost just started getting into it there because there's so much to talk about. Paul, I don't know if you have anything that you would like to add as well, based on these questions that we've had coming up as well.
I think maybe just to sum this up, what was actually just said, but maybe not with the terminology. In the end, it's a bit about finding the business case also for the issue, kind of to really drive this forward. And one hurdle that we currently also still need to tackle is a bit the clarification of responsibilities. So who is it actually in the different countries that shall act? So yes, the countries, somehow it's the navies, it's the coast guard, it's police, etc. So this is something which is actually also part of our research that's currently going on in the different projects.
Great, thank you. And we'll take that as our final comment for today. Please, if there's any other questions, do keep sending them in the chat and we can follow up afterwards. Also, if there's any interviews that anyone would like to do, let us know. You can contact me at holly@revolve.media, and I would be happy to put you in touch with these lovely spokespeople we've had today. Very intelligent, very knowledgeable, and experts in the subject. So I've spoken to them all individually as well, and they can talk for hours about it. So if you have any questions, these are your people for sure. Thank you again for a great session, everyone. And yeah, if there is interest for the chemical munitions and their environmental impact, please also let us know in the comments, and I'm sure you'll be seeing these faces again. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening, and speak soon.